Olá, muito bem, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais uma edição do UJLCAST, o podcast da UJL. Eu apareci aqui de novo extraordinariamente porque temos mais uma convidada internacional. Dessa vez estamos com a Ana Tymoshenko. Ela é uma estudante ucraniana, líder de movimentos libertários na Ucrânia. Então, ela veio falar um pouco com a gente sobre a situação do movimento liberal na Ucrânia. So now I'm going to switch to English. Anna, thank you to take your time to speak with us. It's a great pleasure to speak with you again. To begin with, please present yourself to the Brazilian audience.
Thank you for invitation. I'm glad to be here as well. My name is Anna Tymoshenko. Hello, everybody. I am 20 years old. I am from Ukraine, and I'm from a non-profit, non-governmental organization, Ukrainian Students for Freedom, which is an educational organization, and we also provide political actions, for example, protests and so on. And I'm running Kiev department, which is the biggest one, the capital one. Here I am to speak about my country, the war which is happening there, and how it affects the world.
So first and foremost, we always like to understand more about the story of the people we are interviewing. So how did you enter the libertarian classical liberal movement?
It's such a good question because I think I've been raised with such liberal values, even through the fact my parents were born and raised in the Soviet Union. They had pretty European values, for example, freedom, and they appreciated freedom of speech and freedom of choice they have in Ukraine, which they didn't have in the Soviet Union. So when I turned 17, I was introduced to the Ukrainian Students for Freedom, who already existed as an organization, and I recognized that there are a lot of people with the same values in my generation, and this is the way we can be together, and this is what brings us together. I've met my society, my favorite part of society, USF, on Free Generation Forum, which was a big educational event, and there were a lot of topics, for example, about medical cannabis, about free market, free economics, and there were a lot of people who supported those ideas, and that's why I was sitting and listening to it, and I've been understanding that it will make the world greater.
I understand that you are a big leadership in Students for Freedom. One thing that I noticed in Brazil, at least, is that most of the engaged students are from courses such as economics. I myself am a student of economics. In law, there are many lawyers in the classical liberal movement in Brazil. We in fact have a problem with that because it's a sort of a bubble. We find it difficult to attract people from other courses such as medicine, engineering, even tech. Do you have this sort of problem in Ukraine? How do you deal with that?
Well, in the USF, we have united all of the courses, I think, including medicine, engineering, and so on. Of course, there are a lot of philosophers and a lot of lawyers and economy studies, but the thing is that it depends on the person and his or her worldview. I think more and more people from tech especially will become to the ideas of liberty, and they will become freer and they will become more liberated, if we can say so, because free market rules, and everybody will understand it sooner or later, when they will understand the way it affects their own lives, their private life, their private freedom and economic one as well.
In Brazil, part of this problem we face in Brazil is because there's a clear left-wing bias in universities. So most of students are afraid of speaking up in certain contexts, inside classroom especially. Do you guys face this sort of problem in Ukraine, or?
Yeah, probably I would say so, but it's all about education and, for example, educational events. Every organization starts from the little events for 10 or 15 people, and then it becomes greater and greater. It becomes to 200, 300, 400 people, and more people want to attend and want to learn. I think there are a lot of left societies in educational universities because they provide justice, but not in the right political way, but in the left political way. Most of them are popular, but what we do, we provide more knowledge and more connections, more network between people about freedom, about our ideas, about libertarianism, and that's how we show that we're not scaring people, we're just uniting, and we show our worldview. That's how people learn it, and there are more and more people each year. That surprised a lot, and in a great way.
Do you guys have the freedom to organize events in universities? Because in our case, there's a special situation we find interesting. A couple of years ago, a student in the south of Brazil tried to organize an event, especially talking about the Holodomor in the Federal University of Santa Catarina. It's a big university here. And the university denied permission to organize this event. He needed to turn that bring that to the courts to judge upon the case, to have permission to speak about it in university, because the teachers weren't allowing him to organize these events. Do you have the freedom to organize those events in Ukraine?
Yeah, we do have. I'm sorry that you were not allowed to organize an event about Holodomor, because I think that that special genocide of Ukrainians should be really lightened, especially now. We should remember it, and we need to know, and we need to remember that history is always about the circle. The magic circle, which is not that magic we want right now. Speaking about Ukraine, yeah, we do have, I would say, a lot of freedom in universities to organize events. But of course, there are a lot of events which are organized outside of the universities. For example, there are YAS centers, or there are hubs for YAS, for young people, for students as well, or for young workers, which just want to gather and they want to discuss something. For example, in Kiev, in Lviv, in Odessa, in each big city in Ukraine, we have society that will support us, and that will want to be there. Sometimes we need to we need not to listen to universities administration, because they're also about the government. They're also about someone who is telling them what to do and what not to do. That's why we need to find ways to spread our ideas, even through some denies, some rejects, and so on.
Yeah, it's similar to what we're trying to do in Brazil. Do you guys have student unions in Ukraine? How does that work?
We do. We have a lot of student unions. For example, there are non-profit organizations. For example, the Ukrainian Students for Freedom, or some other organization which unites students from different universities all over Ukraine, or just in some cities. Especially big ones, of course. There are some organizations just inside each university or each school, which also can be the part of the whole organization. I mean, all Ukrainian organization. For example, we will have our departments, our little gatherings in some universities in Kyiv next year. That will make the way of spreading freedom and our ideas easier, of course, because it will become more common, it will become more provided and more promoted, of course.
Yeah, in Brazil, we have lots of student unions, and they are elected by the students to work together with the university administration or the school administration. And there's lots of political influence in those circles. So there are open Marxist, open Leninist, Stalinist groups controlling universities in representing students in Brazil. And they have a big political influence as well. So our work is trying to take in those spaces and bring the libertarian ideas to those circles. But
as far as I can see, I'm sorry.
Sorry, please go on.
Firstly, I saw that we have a pretty common system, because we also have students' organizations, and some of them they provide some left ideas, but it's nothing about communism or socialism. Ukraine becomes more and more decommunized. That is very important for us, because we've been living in communism and socialism regime, and we saw what it led to. But nowadays, something about left-wing moves are mostly about left liberty. You know what I'm saying about? Like when they try to provide justice for all, justice, not freedom, but it's not about politics in the universities. That's it.
Yeah, and what would you say are the spaces that the youth has to be politically active in Ukraine? Do you see that the youth is politically active?
There are a lot of politically active young people in Ukraine. For example, our organization organizes a lot of protests against government, preferably, or against some moves government does. It is also about organization, the protest by students, parliaments, how they call them, and it's not only about non-profit, it's also about Ukrainian young people who are activists by themselves. There are a lot of stories, and they are not all good. But for example, after 2013, when we had the Revolution of Dignity, after that, Ukraine crossed this line between tyranny and democracy, and that was the point when people in Ukraine became freer, and also it contains the protests and political activism, because finally, with each year, we have less and less cases of taking people to the police stations after protests, and we don't have anything like gunshot by policemen. Of course, I'm speaking all about it. We have our protests where we can share our opinion, where we can stay, and where we can show our power of our nation.
Yeah, you mentioned those incidents in 2014. In Brazil, we had a similar incident. I don't know if you are familiarized with Brazilian politics, probably not. But we had in 2012, 2013, mass protests because of corruption scandals involving our ex-president Dilma Rousseff, and the libertarian movement. I won't say started in those protests, but became more evident, grew stronger because of those protests. And I believe Students for Freedom in Ukraine probably faced a similar situation in the Euromaidan. I believe you call it Glory Revolution. Sorry, what was the
Euromaidan, or the Revolution of Dignity. Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe you guys faced a similar situation because of these events. So talking more about the war. Of course, in the news, people talk about lots and lots about it, but it's always interesting to hear some insider stories about it. How did the start of the war affected your daily life or the work of Students for Freedom?
For us, for Students for Freedom, the war, and like for each normal Ukrainian men or women, the war started not in February this year, but 8 years ago, when Russia occupied Crimea and parts of our east regions, Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts. It started with this, and it became, it has been becoming more and more difficult and harder each year. And of course, last autumn, I mean, in November 2021, we've been hearing from American government, from the British government, European Union, that Russia will invade Ukraine. And most of the people didn't want to believe it, as same as I didn't want to believe it. But of course, February 24th, 2022, it just turned our lives upside down. People started acting from the very beginning of this day. There are a lot of people who started volunteering, a lot of people who wanted to go to the army. I mean, there were lines to get in the line to go to the army because people just wanted to defend our country and to be in the front line and to kill every person which wants to kill us, because Russians didn't come in Ukraine for good. They didn't want to do something good or to make our lives better. They all say on their TV that they want to make Ukraine freer, but the problem is we've been already a free country from 1991 when we exited the Soviet Union. That was the way. They just came here in Ukraine just to kill people, to make the genocide, to burn out our fields, to torture and rape our children. So people just they wanted, and they want now, and they will want to protect themselves, their families, and their home. Part of my family, male part of my family, was in the territory defense. It is the part of army which is formed in each city to defend just their city. My mom, me, and my sister, we've been volunteering for months. As far as almost every person in the Ukrainian Students for Freedom, we have activists and we have members of our organization which are in the front line right now. We have paramedics as well who help people on the front line right now. In the Donbass region, for example, and it's very hard because we worry about them and we try to help as much as we can. Also, there is a humanitarian center, Kiev Humanitarian Center, who provides mats and ammunition for army and mats also for hospitals in Ukraine and hospitals in the east of Ukraine, which helps people who are delivered from the front line with gunshots or something like this. Many people if we're not speaking only about Ukrainian Students for Freedom, many people finally defined themselves as Ukrainians, not only the person. Many people recognize that Russia has been our enemy for many years, for hundreds of years, frankly speaking, and that was the point. And that was a point, and they will never return back.
I especially myself, I consumed lots of US and Canada news, and I heard that prior to the war, Zelensky faced serious accusations of corruption and promised open markets and privatizations, and didn't deliver. Of course, now during the war, he became national hero, fairly enough. But would you say that this corruptions, accusations, and these things that Western media are saying, these accusations are true?
What can I say here? Zelensky was not the best president of all the time. I mean, yeah, he has not been a bad one. Like, for example, Yanukovych, who wanted us to become the part of Russia. But of course, there were a lot of problems in Ukraine, and there are a lot of problems. Nowadays, we have to solve another ones. Speaking about corruption, the thing here is when the war ends, and if corruption still exists, we will come to the streets, and if President Zelensky, who is now a real national hero and the symbol of Ukraine all over the world, if he does something bad that we don't like and that we don't want to accept, we will take him off like Ukrainians already did in 2014. I think this is the main point because everybody in Ukrainian government already knows how it works, and they need to work for this nation because we survived it as a nation. We showed our power 8 years ago, and we show it right now. There will be no other way to make Ukraine greater and happier. But to provide reforms we need, and to decrease the level of corruption, and of course to have economical reforms, free market reforms, and to make not only our personal life but economic one free.
And during peacetime, what would you say are the top priority policies that Ukraine need to implement? What are the major problems that Ukraine is facing politically?
Well, during the peacetime, speaking the days until 24th of February, of course, we had the problem of annexed Crimea and occupied Donbass region. It was a big problem because we know that there are a lot of Ukrainians living there that have no ways to exit, and they should live under Russia because of personal reasons or political ones. Also, of course, there were a lot of things needed changing in our courts and in our policy system. I mean, we needed and we still need to make Ukraine freer, to provide more freedoms. For example, medical cannabis was only legalized during the wartime, the full invasion time, because there are a lot of people who need it right now because of psychological problems, which came back home from the east, and when they have tremor or when they have a pain that cannot be reduced with anything but medical cannabis, people started using it, and I mean, it was allowed finally. Also, of course, we have people in the government who provide corruption, but there is ways to change it, and of course it will change completely. The number of these people is decreasing each year because people understand everything of it, and they speak about it out loud, and government doesn't kill these people. Government listens to these people and will do something to come along with us.
So I have just a couple more questions. I myself have a deep interest in Soviet story, especially the story of Soviet repression, because in West we don't hear about it. We don't. If you ask someone on the streets, what is a gulag, Soviet concentration camp, they won't know it. They won't even recognize it exists, because we simply don't talk about it. You, of course, in Ukraine have had a rough time during Soviet Union, suffered a lot with repression, with, of course, Holodomor, which caused the death and deportation of around 4 to 7 million people. How do you deal with that in Ukraine? The students learn about it in schools. They have contact with survivors. How is the situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, no, of course we have these lessons in school, like we learn it on our history lessons, and of course thanks to Ukraine, we picked the course of decommunization, not the course of returning to the Soviet Union, because Ukraine understands, like, I mean, the whole country and Ukrainians as a nation understand a lot of diseases and a lot of disasters which were caused by the Soviet Union, by its government, and by this regime. Speaking about Holodomor, and speaking about me, I've been hearing about this. I've been listen to the stories about it since I was a very little child, because my grandmother, she survived the Holodomor, but there were a lot of stories she just didn't know how to tell her grandchildren, because it's more horrible than a horror film, because it happened in real life, when there was the whole village and there was nothing to eat for like 100 or 200 of people, and that was only the example of the village she's been living in. Speaking about the whole Ukraine, we know that there are a lot of people, I mean millions of people, who died because of Holodomor, and it was of course man-made. It was made by the Soviet government, because that was not the first one, but one of the brightest examples of genocide of Ukrainians by Russians, because like, we all know that the Soviet government was Russian, and they wanted to recreate Russian Empire, but not in the way of monarchy, but in the way of power they had. So they wanted everybody to be a slave of this government and of these people on the top.
So, as I said, I am very interested in sort of history. I, in fact, I have a project that is the first project of this sort in Brazil, aimed to translate material from accounts of survivors and lectures that are available in English. I am translating them to Portuguese and make it available to Brazilian audiences. By the time that the people will watch it on YouTube, I will link the information on the description. I had one more thing to ask you, but I totally forgot because.
I can also tell you that Holodomor is, yeah, it is not the first one, but one of the broadest examples of genocide. There were a lot of executions of scholars, of writers, of artists, of musicians, especially Ukrainian ones, because they all wanted Ukraine to develop. So they didn't want to be the part of this regime, a part of this country. Also, they wanted to promote Ukrainian language, and they wanted to speak Ukrainian language, and it also was an occasion for execution, which is we understand it now that it's completely mass and people understand it then, but they had nothing to do with that. There were executions and people were shot. There also were concentration camps, we know, for example, in Siberia, where people were taken to just to be slavers, to work there for 20, for 30 years, and they had no way to exit, because like it is just a desert with snow and a forest, and you have nothing to do. That was also one of the ways with which Soviet government wanted Ukrainians to suffer.
I don't know if you heard about Anne Applebaum. There is a story that talks about the Soviet repression history, and he talked about it. she said that the whole purpose of the Holodomor wasn't only political control, but in fact to erase totally Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian identity as a whole. People were arrested because they were speaking Ukrainian in schools instead of Russian. They were speaking about Ukrainian folk and keeping Ukrainian culture alive. But
This
I
is
believe,
absolutely true.
yeah, exactly. It's a such a situation in Brazil. As I said to you, we have lots of political parties and political personalities. There are openly Leninists and Stalinists. There's even a Brazilian Communist Party that has a manifesto expressing the inspiration in Lenin ideals, treating Lenin as a sort of national hero. So what would you say to the people in Brazil who make less of the horrors that happened in Soviet Union, in Ukraine, in all Eastern Europe?
What can I say here? I think they just don't understand that the justice and equality which was provided by these regimes, I mean socialism and Leninism, and which was provided by Lenin and Stalin and other Soviet governors, it is an absolute illusion, because Soviet Union was the empire of corruption, and it was the empire when only some people got I don't know, just food, like just some people, 1% or even less, had butter, had meat, had fish, and all other people, they were suffering each day. But they were so brainwashed and they wanted to think, so they thought about it, like it will become better. It is everything which is caused not by our government. What would I say here? To sum everything up, people of all over the world need to become freer. And this is the way you need to choose freedom over terrorism and freedom over tyranny, as far as democracy over tyranny. And people, you should appreciate your voice, your opinion, and your life. First of all, that's the way the government will appreciate your life as well.
So it's a great final message, I would say. One more time, Anna, thank you to taking time to speaking with us. It's a great pleasure to hear from you, and I hope we can make maybe a partnership to work together in the future.
Yeah, I hope so as well. Thank you for an invitation. One more message to say, like, I just want to remind you that we feel the support all over the world, and we're thankful for that. So keep supporting Ukraine, because now we're fighting for the freedom over the biggest empire in history. Thank you one more time.